It's an incredible honor to serve our community in such a unique way, as we listen and research, as we visit with people representing every type of background you can imagine, as we take in stories of triumph or despair, as we all ride these incredible times together. We recognize that at the end of the day, those committed to doing good want to be able to have honest and balanced conversations that offer real solutions for all. Here's where we come together to do just that. Welcome to The Balanced Voice. I'm your host, Rania Mankarious. Welcome, everybody, to the premiere episode of the Balanced Voice podcast. We are so unbelievably excited. We're so honored that our premier guests are the one and only Dave Ward. We are sitting in the Dave Ward building, Crime Stoppers of Houston, and we're thrilled to have him, and Bill Balleza, a longtime colleague and friend, and also a veteran, somebody that we admire so much. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Good to be here, Rania. Thank you.
We are being careful to social distance, so I've separated myself from the podcast studio. But, you know, we want to discuss so much with you today, from your legendary careers to how media has changed and all the different changes you've seen. I've obviously followed both of you. I've read so much about you, full circle stories that I found to be really beautiful in following your life. I want to circle back to the beginning and how you two ended up in the positions that you ultimately found yourself in. Dave, reading your book, I know it wasn't always the plan to enter journalism.
No, really wasn't. I've had a lot of good fortune fall in my lap over the years. I started as a radio station disc jockey at a radio station in Tyler back in 1958, and went from there to WACO radio in Waco as a disc jockey. But the news director in Waco, Bob Vanderbitter, he taught a radio news writing course out at Baylor University. And his students were always running in and out of the building, going to wrecks and fires and ripping wire copy and doing all kinds of things. And I got to thinking, they're having a lot more fun than I am, sitting in here playing Vaughn Monroe over and over. So I more or less monitored his course, and when I got a chance, a news reporter opening came at KNUZ here in Houston. It's no longer on the air. But I was hired, and I worked at KNUZ for 4 years before I went over to Channel 13.
My beginning was also kind of unique. I got out of the Marine Corps, and I went to college, and the guidance counselor said, "What do you want to major in?" I said, "Something that requires as little math as possible." I had flunked Algebra 1 twice in high school. And she said, "We have a broadcasting program here that has no math requirement." I said, "Great, I'll do that." So that's how I turned a weakness into an eventual strength.
But I read somewhere, Bill, that you were interested at one point in becoming a San Antonio police officer.
My plan getting out of the Marine Corps was to become a San Antonio police officer. I had two uncles who'd been police officers there and a cousin, and that was really my idea. But then when I got in this broadcasting program at San Antonio College, I just fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there were no Hispanics in the medium. But in 1971, when I graduated, these community activist groups were beginning to challenge broadcast licenses based on their hiring practices. So that's how I got my first start.
Wow.
Went to KRON-TV in San Francisco because suddenly news directors all around the country were looking for qualified Hispanic. Well, I wasn't qualified. I learned on the job. Well, I think like most of us do.
Well, and when I started at Channel 13, there were 7 white men. If I had been a Hispanic or African-American or any female,
right,
I never would have gotten in the back door.
Yep. No,
that's just the way it was back then. That's a long time ago.
Yep. It didn't change until 1971.
Yeah.
And the industry has changed so much, and we're going to talk about a lot of the politics and a lot of the things that I think are really fascinating right now. But even just talking about the physicalities around the industry. I mean, Dave, in your book, you said, Dave shot with a Bell & Howell 16 millimeter hand wound camera. You said, quote, it weighed about 8 or 9 pounds. It was heavy, but it took good film, 16 millimeter black and white. And my goodness, how things have changed in the span of both of your careers in terms of how video's captured and just being on the network from black and white to color. Yeah. So many different things.
One interesting story about that camera. There was a racetrack over here near Bryan College Station years ago, a 2-mile oval track. And Mario Andretti, the race car driver, was there shooting, running tire tests on an Indy race car. And I went over there to shoot that, and I've got this big camera, and I'm standing up on the flagman's stand so that Mario goes right under me. And I would film him going under, and then the next lap I'd turn around and film him coming out, edit it together, and it just looked like a continuous thing. But I met Mario Andretti several years later and told him my one big fear was that I was going to drop that camera just as you came under me. And if I did, he was doing, like 200 miles an hour. It would have killed him, no doubt. Yeah. And he said, I'm so glad you didn't drop that damn camera. And so am I.
We both started in the days of film, but Dave started in the days of black and white film.
Yeah.
You were a real pioneer in this business.
They had a horrible, huge fire downtown at what was called, I think, the Pink Pussycat Club or something like that. And it was right there on Market Square. Well, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I got down there, and from the outside, all you could see were some flames in the windows of this 2-story brick building. I went down the street about a block, and on the other side of the street was a fire escape. And I pulled that down and climbed up about 3 floors, so then I could shoot down on this thing, actually about 4 floors. And it was just a cauldron of flames. And here I am shooting black and white film. And I was wishing then, I wish this was color film, but I got a lot of really good film with that fire. Then the wind changed and the smoke came up there, and I thought I was going to die trying to get off that fire escape, but I did.
We transitioned from film to videotape around 1975. I hated that. I loved film.
Yep.
How did you feel about that?
I loved film too. I learned how to edit film. Yep. So many inches is 1 second and so on. And you'd rip the film and put the scenes in order and then come back and splice them all together. And of course, every now and then one of your splices would break when the thing was on the air, but not if you did it correctly. I did too, but there's been so many changes.
Oh my goodness.
In television over the years, not all of them for the best, I don't think.
You both have spoken about, Dave, I'll read a quote from you. You said, to gain the audience's trust, or this was written about you on your website, Ward strove to deliver a balanced newscast by covering both sides of an issue and above all, getting the facts correct. Yes. Bill, I was reading about you on KPRC's website, and there's a page where people were submitting quotes about you or their thoughts about you, and one of them said, Bill's voice is a calming factor in a sea of chaotic news stories. You two have proven the importance of integrity in news reporting, in honesty in news reporting. But I think today when you look at media, it's a little different in the sense that it's maybe biases come through. It's about maybe the facts are not important. It's how do we say this so we get the soundbite and we're number one in the ratings and we'll deal with the issues later. We struggle with it. What are your thoughts about where media is today?
To this day, I don't know whether Dave is a Democrat or a Republican, and that's the way it should be. And that's not the way it is anymore.
No.
I think that that the mainstream media, not so much local news media, but mainstream media is a very biased, and there's no separation anymore between editorial and opinion and news at the national level. It's all just become one thing together, and you can't recognize what's news and what's opinion anymore.
Yeah, true. You know, one of my heroes in this business, and the one that I thought was the best at it, was Walter Cronkite.
Mm-hmm.
On the air, you would have thought he was a little slightly on the conservative side. In real life, he was a flaming liberal. I mean, he was left of the till of the tongue. He was really a very liberal thinking person. But on the air, he kept that to himself. And he reported the news the way it should be, factually and without opinion.
I think that holds true for many of the early broadcasters. Huntley Brinkley, Eric Seberide, all of them maintained that objective presentation of news, unbiased, tell it straight, tell it factually, let the viewer decide. It's not our place to inject our political feelings into anything we report.
Right. And when Walter Cronkite did his report from Vietnam on the quagmire that place had become, Lyndon Johnson, the President of the United States, turned to one of his aides and he said, well, if we've lost Cronkite, we've lost the war. And we've lost the American people. And that was pretty close to true.
Well, I was in Vietnam as a Marine, and I can tell you that Cronkite's appraisal of the situation in Vietnam was dead on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he wasn't being political in that statement. He was being completely
factual,
objectionable. Yeah, it was complete truth what he was saying. No way to win.
Yeah.
Not the way we were fighting it.
Yeah.
But you think about the power the media has, and no one can argue that the media has unbelievable power. And the fact that we see, the bias so clearly, and Bill, I agree with you. I think local news is not there yet. I think individual reporters can clearly see their bias, but in general, when they're actually reporting news, I think local news doesn't waste time on that. Even there's not enough time. But given mainstream media and how biased it's become, is it fair to say the media, which is an industry I love? I mean, at third grade, I would sit and watch the news on repeat. I told my parents I wanted to be Barbara Walters. I just was. What third grader is in love with newscasters at the time? You don't understand what's going on, but you guys have always been sort of my everything I've aspired to be. But the way media's turned now, is it fair to say that maybe it's fed into some of the division in our country, or it's lit the fire in terms of these local arguments and these political fights and divided people? I mean, the bias plus the power?
Absolutely. I think the media, the national news media, is extremely divisive. They blame the president on being divisive, and that may be true. But the news media is as well. I mean, to be completely honest with you, it's to the news media's advantage to see controversy and to exploit it somewhat. And this administration has given it ample opportunity to do that. But the difference now is that the national news media in the main has found this president and this administration so objectionable that they've dropped all objectivity. They have allowed bias to enter their reporting, and we've gone past the tipping point now, and the entire American people realizes that the news media is not trustworthy.
Yeah. It's almost like America is out of control and don't know where we're going.
And the thing is that the national news media is fanning the flames of that. Seem to be. They have taken certain movements, given it names like racial reckoning. What's the other one? That and made it sort of a crusade of its own. The media has, and given small factions of our society an outsized voice, and made it so that anyone who differs is afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge issue, and I actually want to get back to that in a second. But I come to think of the defund police movement, and we talk to people all over this country, and they'll say, you know, we don't want to necessarily defund police. We do want to reform police, but these local municipalities are looking at, you know, smaller groups, but they happen to be the loudest people in the room. The media's given them all the attention. But you also think about the fact that everybody right now thinks they're a reporter, because I have my phone. You know, I can go live at any second, and as long as you have an opinion, it carries weight, you know, on social media. And if it's a controversial opinion, it carries more weight. How has that changed the industry or ruined, you know, the industry?
Well, the national news media set the stage for that to happen. Mm-hmm. They have shown that opinion is okay to inject, that objectivity is not that important, that whatever you happen to feel is okay to say. And so that's given, you know, the person on Facebook with a telephone or on Twitter or somewhere, the agency to go out and report.
Yeah. And as a result, there's so much misinformation and so much untruth on Facebook and all of these social media platforms that you don't know who to believe.
And you can't trust the national news media either, unfortunately, because it's so injected with bias now.
You guys have a long-standing history of supporting law enforcement. I just want, you know, Dave, you've supported law enforcement for as long as we've been following you. And obviously, again, you're in the Dave Ward building, Crime Stoppers building. Bill, you've served in the military, literally willing to give your life up for the freedoms of this country. What are your thoughts now about the sentiments towards law enforcement and to those who serve in the country right now?
What is a society without law and order?
Right. True. And what upsets me is that there are incidents involving law officers around the country. One bad cop ruins the whole thing for all of the thousands of very hardworking, diligent, supremely confident individuals who protect us by enforcing our laws. It's just one bad apple, you know, can spoil the whole barrel. And that is a shame. Some of those guys should never have had a badge and a gun.
And there is a segment, unfortunately, of our society that would like nothing better than a breakdown of law and order to achieve its own aim. And that's very evident out there right now. That's why we have this defund the police movement. It's actually happening, or it's been proposed in some parts of the country, including Austin, Texas, the capital of Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. Where would we be without our police departments?
I hope we don't have to find out.
Yeah, me too.
I think enough citizens are now starting to speak up. And you know, I keep saying when did we become a country that can't have two conversations at the same time? You know, we can talk about the need for reforming police, while we also say, but that doesn't mean we need to punish all police officers. You know, we can have two conversations at the same time, but it seems like people have lost the ability to have balanced conversations. If you don't agree with me, you're cut out. You have no space. You can't talk. I don't want to hear it. And that's part of the reason why we started the podcast, is because we wanted people. A lot of people want to talk about different things, but they're afraid to now. And you're setting the tone that we can still have these balanced conversations. And that's, again, why we're so so thankful to have you. When you look at this year, 2020, you know, you started with coronavirus. I'm sorry. Well, for us, we started with bail reform, which has, you know, been a very big issue, felony bail reform specifically. We've gone on to coronavirus and the unbelievable global pandemic. You went to George Floyd's killing. You've gone to the defund the police movement. You've gone to these riots and protests across the country. You have a presidential election coming up. Are you guys like, oh my gosh, I so want to walk into the newsroom and slam the door open and sit down at the anchor desk and just start reporting?
No, not me.
No, maybe.
I have made certain observations here today with you, Rania, that I could not have made as a newsman.
Sure, me too.
We couldn't have said the things that we've said, made the observations that we've made. And frankly, I would hate to be in the business right now. It's the country is in such an upheaval right now. And this November election, regardless of what happens, regardless of the outcome, I'm afraid there's going to be trouble.
Well, there very well could be.
I'm really afraid of that. And I would hate to be behind an anchor desk reporting on that.
Me too.
Hate it
myself.
So you two, as we start to wrap up our time together, you were the faces of two networks that, you know, I think it's safe to say were rivals. You know, I wonder what the behind the scenes was like. I mean, Bill, did you sit there and say, you know, oh, Dave got the story on, or, you know, Dave, did you ever sit there and say, Bill got this, or, you know, or did you guys sit and talk about each other in news meetings, or what? Did you just kind of each do your own thing and do the best you could?
First of all, I believe that Houston is a very unique news market, unlike any other, because we have always been collegial. All this news community, very friendly, very collegial. Yes, we compete, but
I don't consider us rivals.
Never,
we were competitors, but I think we made the industry better here for our due diligence in trying to get the facts right. Really, and I had an interesting thing. This was several years ago. You know, Tom Cook is on early in the morning. A woman came, Tom Cook and I were standing together at some fair somewhere downtown. And this woman came up to us and she says, oh, you're Tom Cook. I wake up with you every morning. And you're Dave Ward. I go to bed with you every night. I told Tom we should have made a promo.
Did you learn anything from each other?
I learned a lot from Dave, and by his example. And here's what I learned: never give up your news roots as an anchorman. Yeah. I mean, don't let them shackle you to that desk. Get out there and cover the big stories. I learned that from Dave, watching him do it. Then I demanded the right to do the same thing. The second thing I learned from Dave is he took his job here in Houston as a news anchor at Channel 13 and made it into a position in the community by caring about the community and getting out there and raising money for good causes. That was another very important lesson I learned from Dave. And it made me want to do the exact same thing.
Well, and I've got to interject here that in my opinion, the best television news anchor person ever in this city was Ron Stone.
Absolutely.
At Channel 2. I learned so much from him. He became a good, close friend of mine. Yes, we were competitors, but we were also very, very good friends.
And they both had the same philosophy about community and service. And I learned that from Ron too. That was a great legacy that he passed on.
Truly.
Well, I know that when I walked in the doors of Crime Stoppers in 2006, the first thing, as you know, much younger than I am now, the first thing that the executive director, Catherine Cabanis, did at the time was give me these VHS videos to watch Crime Stoppers reenactments that I think, Dave, you inspired and really put together. And that was how we would share reenactments, news stories with the community, and ask for information for people to call Crime Stoppers. And so to Bill's point, you've had a very public service oriented career, and we're one organization that's benefited tremendously from it.
Well, thank you.
I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to be with us today on our premiere episode. It is such a great honor to sit with you. Bill, one day I'm gonna beg you for a wooden box. I'm gonna have to put it in order. I've been watching you and the incredible woodwork you've been doing, and I'm gonna figure out how to get one of those from you at some point.
I don't know what I'd do in retirement without that hobby. How about you? It's so boring sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes it is. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but Dave has an office here and continues his fine community service out of this building. So that's
I probably need to come down here more often.
Fine way to.
My hobby really is riding passenger trains. I just love to get on a train.
I do too.
Sometimes I don't care where I have to go to catch it, and I don't care where it's going, as long as I can get on it.
That's in his book. It's a good story.
Yeah. And I've always had that passion for passenger trains. Really have.
We thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for coming to the building too. It's been such a pleasure and an honor. We hope everybody continues to tune in to the podcast. Follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast. Subscribe to the podcast. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you both and all of you. So thank you again so very much.
This episode was brought to you by Brigitte and Bashar Kalai. We thank them for their generous support and their alignment with our mission.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to our first episode of the Balanced Voice podcast. We were thrilled to have Dave Ward and Bill Balleza, even if I wasn't in my podcast studio, but it was the best to have them in here. Listen, there were 3 takeaways that I wanted to quickly share with you. One, I was really moved by the way they talked about their love of editing film and sort of getting an imagery of them dealing with real film. It made me understand how long these 2 men have been in their field and at their craft, and really deepened my level of respect for them and for anyone that does what they love with such passion and integrity for so long. I think when we find people like that in community, we really need to support them and thank them and show our appreciation for them. The second thing that really struck me was the really honest conversation we had about bias in the media. I think there is a place for commentary, certainly, but when it comes to news, we have to demand that we have to make it clear that we don't want the bias, because I think it is dividing our country. And it was really interesting to hear Bill and Dave talk about that. And then the third thing is they really wrapped up the interview talking about the value of community service. We know that Dave Ward has loved law enforcement his entire career and served law enforcement. Bill Balleza, a veteran, has served the military. Both of them basically have made it a point, however, to serve their community. And that was really moving for me. We run a nonprofit. We are in the business of serving others, but we also rely on community partners who help extend our reach and our voice in our hands. So we're thankful to all of you, all of our partners here and across Texas and across the country. We're very thankful to our first podcast donors, Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, who are making this possible for us. And we encourage the community to continue working together because it really does make a difference. At the end of the day, we are thrilled to be launching this podcast. We are excited to host a series of really compelling interviews with people from Houston, Texas, from across this country, covering really difficult topics. You're going to hear first accounts from victims who have gone through unbelievable things. We're going to be talking to leaders in the sex trafficking industry. We're going to be looking at policymakers, lawmakers, and really tackling some very, very compelling conversations, but in a balanced way, offering solutions. Please join us every Wednesday, 10 o'clock. We'll be right here on Crime Stoppers' Facebook page. We'll also be sharing the podcast across all podcast platforms. We are a podcast for the community, by the community, and we're so proud to do it together. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. If you missed anything from the show, please check out our show notes at thebalancedvoicewithrania.com. This episode was edited and mixed by the team at Real News PR.
Our executive producer is Sydney Zeiker. Our advising producer is Katie Myers. Our media and quality assurance director is Tanya Cruz. And finally, our creative design director is Elizabeth McChesney. To find out more information about Crime Stoppers of Houston or to get involved with our prevention programming, please visit us at crime-stoppers.org. You can find us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast, and you can find me online at The Rania Report.